the more complex the technology you work for is, the more you have to lean on research, because really it has a multiplier effect as to how smart your decision can be on the product development front. So I can just recommend it to the full extent. And the sooner you do it, the better it is. You need to be able to really communicate the value of research early on so that you can really build an organization that think long-term in a strategic way and that is empowered to do good work.
Great to have Caroline on this week. I know security and governance are top of mind for everyone, as they should be, but can also be seen as a blocker, an obstacle to user experience, to moving quickly. And so great to have someone on who's thinking about the trade-offs and how to minimize those in her everyday.
Yeah, exactly. Caroline works at a security company, Dashlane, so really interesting to hear about how the high bar they have, as we all do, but especially a high bar for data privacy and all that, and how they enable others even with that high bar.
Give it a listen. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Awkward Silences. Today, we're here with Caroline Morchio, the head of UX at Dashlane, and we're going to be talking about user experience in the context of a security app. So what does it look like to create a positive, helpful, good user experience when you're, working in some constrained kind of environments and thinking about security at the same time. So really excited to get into this topic, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. We've got Carol here too.
Glad to be here. Yeah, on the product side, we always feel like there's a sort of a conflict sometimes between building the best, most secure product and the most usable product. So excited to dig into sort of how you approach it.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's start from the top. So what does UX mean in this context? How do you think about what is a positive user experience in the context of a security forward app like Dashlane?
So basically, to give lots of context to our listeners, Dashlane is incredible security technology. Between the zero-knowledge architecture, the passkey support we launched in 2022, and now we also launched confidential computing. So our key business differentiator, the cornerstone of why Dashlane is here today, is data privacy, right? We care very, very much about that. So you can imagine how complex the technology is and where that leaves UX besides that. And basically, UX for Dashlane is actually the business differentiator number 2. That is something that we're super proud of, because at the end of the day, the security teams that use Dashlane care about how their staff perceive and use those security tools every day. Because if they don't accept security tools, they don't make their businesses secure on a daily basis, right? And that's where we come in. That's where UX is such a powerful force, is how we make security matter to the end user. So when you think about all of that, when I started Dashlane, it was a 40 people plus product organization, 0 UXR. It was shocking to me. I was like, whoa. And my job was really to make this organization user-centric, and to farm, as I jokingly say, product thinkers. How do we elevate our product folks to think long-term strategically? And the way to do that in my playbook is always to have research. Research drives innovation. It is a key part of my UX practice, and I can really farm that user centricity from within. And that's the type of UX that basically we want to build. A UX that is based on trust, on transparency. But those values of trust and transparency is the cornerstone of the UX we want to build, but it's also how it influences everything we do, and especially research. And that's why it's so important, because now research is basically, and we joke about that a lot, but it's the connective tissue as to how we build product at Dashlane in our continuous discovery process. Yeah.
For some of our listeners who are working with smaller UXR teams or trying to advocate for UXR, I'm curious to hear how you went about advocating for UX at a company where it didn't exist so far.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it was a huge endeavor, because in the context of Dashlane, at least it was a later stage company that operated more than 10 years without research. It had one research function prior to my joining that was a failure, so I had to build over that. What I would say is that the way to introduce research is really the same way we build products, quick wins. So I started to take a couple influencers, really analyze the org, see what were the team dynamics, how they were approaching research, what it meant to them, what was their definition of research to start with. And then we started by doing what I called new product innovation projects. So we take a couple of very localized projects, small scope, very innovative to really boost the team, to give them that boost of energy, to feel energized by thinking long-term, broader. And we ran it by customers, selected around the back then ICP that we had. By doing so, it was the first boost to develop our champions, develop awareness, but also to prove to the rest of the organization that research was not disrupting product development, right? And that we could really avoid building the wrong things. And they started seeing the benefits of an evidence-based culture and seeing the power of evidence over time and how much it could unlock over the long term in terms of product development and us like focusing on to the right things to build for our users. But yeah, it takes time. It takes time. And I would say the model of the UXR practice you choose to pick really depends on the maturity level you're in to start with. Yeah.
Yeah. And would you describe that as a lower maturity level, or was it more so with respect to the research in particular?
It was the research in particular. And I think that's the problem of the UXR practice these days is that research is always brought on very later on in the life of a company, in the life of an organization. To me, my playbook research really comes in from the very beginning. That's why we are research-centric. That is the cornerstone foundation. We go from that. But when you don't have that, that's where things is more difficult. And that's why usually for this use case, so later stage interesting research like Dashlane, or a company that is more complex, different teams running global and not having that practice as well, I recommend a hybrid model usually, so that the power of research is decentralized across PX teams. Yes, all the governance and things are decentralized to a couple of experts in the organization. That's what I've proved the most successful, like over the years at least.
Great. Yeah. So you've teased a lot of things. We'll get into more detail throughout the episode, democratization, different methods you're using for user research. But I'm hearing you say you're in an organization where they're valuing UX, and it's really making research always their part of UX. That was kind of what you came into. Maybe we could start with what does UX look like, in a company like this? What are we trying to achieve? You mentioned, what good is a security app if no one's using it because the UX is terrible? But what does that look like to have a positive UX for this kind of application?
I would say the benefit with UX is that UX is now one of the drivers as to how we propel the business forward. It has been part of all the vision work that we do as a company, how we defined our ICP. Those are some key projects that have been led by the UX function time over time in the company. And I would say that based on our results and numbers, we take lots of pride into developing excellence. We're relentless. We really go very, very deep to provide an experience that is highly intuitive and I would say consumer grade in the world of enterprise grade solutions for security, right? But we double down on that, on the power of very simple experiences to win the end user so that we can benefit the higher businesses and the bigger businesses. So what that means on the maturity front is that we have product designers that are very strategic thinkers. They think in terms of systems. They think in terms of experience. They spend lots of time between one another. Every single one of them are in a triad and have like their scope of ownership. But in the way we're structured into the UX team, we're now at a level of maturity where we have domains. They spend lots of time brainstorming within them. We have very often milestones as to how the customer journey is doing, what we're doing wrong, what we're doing right, so that we can at least twice a year revise our goals from a UX standpoint to really double down on the things that we have to improve on, but also evaluate new type of position in terms of differentiation that we can then do some testing around for the long term of the business. Yeah.
Great. So it sounds like you have a long-term view of what UX means. And
always.
You're doing some benchmarking and there's an evergreen component to that. Carol, were you going to ask something?
Yeah, I'd love to dig into some of the unique challenges of doing UX at a security company. I mean, I think as I mentioned at the top, I think often we think about some trade-offs in terms of usability and security. Like, do we want to put in 2FA? We know it's going to be harder every time people log in, but really is a best practice. Are you discussing these type of trade-offs regularly, or is it more
yes.
Okay, let's hear about it. I'd love to hear more.
Yeah. We have so many examples of those, especially when it comes to the onboarding journey of our customers onto Dashlane. That is quite abstract. People don't know what security is. Okay, how do we demystify security during the onboarding journey, for example? I mean, I take this one as an example because that might resonate the most with our listeners. But usually what we do is, again, we really go back to a long-term vision as to what a great looks like for an onboarding journey for a security product. And then we backtrack that with the teams over time so that we can build in small increments, but against a shared goal that we all share at the triad level. And that's a practice that every single product designers have at Dashlane, is that they push for great UX, but also they're amazing advocates of the work, thanks to the research bit. Yeah. And that's why the research is so much of a foundation of what we do, because it is objective, qualitative data that we always bring at the table. Yeah.
And I'm imagining that for something like, let's imagine password requirements, it's not a matter of, should we support the latest best practices in password length and all of that. It's more, how do we, accepting that is the way the world is going and we want to recommend the best passwords, how do we make that as easy as possible to use for the end user?
Yes. And right now, the strategic challenge that we have as UXers is that, as you know, we're moving away from password. Actually, Dashlane is actively pushing the industry forward so that we all become passwordless with passkeys, right? So some of the key questions that we have today from a UX standpoint is how to introduce the world of passwordless and passkey to our current users who have bought us for password management. So that's one of the fun problems that we have to solve.
Yeah, some of whom probably are just getting used to the passwords. It's like I've figured out that I'm thinking of, I'd be curious to hear about some of the research you're doing if you're doing different generations, right? Different levels of tech sophistication. I always think when I think of password management, I got to explain this to my mom, like how this works. I don't know if you're doing different research with different kind of generational or tech savvy groups.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I mean, explaining to my mom and dad, I'm still not done about it with them. But we led from a UX practice group all the work on the ICP because, I mean, to what we were discussing earlier, we want to build something the smart way. So we need focus. Right now, what is good with our ICP is that we have a couple of segments that we're actively trying to sought after. But to be quite frank with you, we did tremendous amount of research into the level of sophistication of the end user and the admins. And what we're dealing with is that for the admins, we have a very clear picture as to what that means. But for the end user, it is extremely difficult to get to a good picture as to what is the tech stack on a daily basis, right? Besides the usual collaboration and communication tools that we all have, the Slack, the GDoc, and whatever else, right? But besides that, basically, we are still navigating with a certain level of assumption, right? And that makes the work more difficult in that way.
I imagine that one of the challenges you face is that the admins expect or understand a certain level of security and then getting the end users to adopt and understand that level.
Yeah,
very interesting.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, in terms of actually how you do UX and UX research, I'm curious, are the methods similar to what we might see elsewhere or different types of studies tend to work better?
So that's something we thought a lot about, especially with the values of trust and transparency that we have. We had to really over-index into research ops at Dashlane to a degree that is super, super high. That's probably the one thing on which we didn't iterate upon. We had to get it right for the first go. But in terms of methodologies, we are pretty traditional. We use the usual things, surveys, interviews, moderated and moderated testings, and why not for generative or evaluative research. Where things flex a little for us and where we stress more the importance of transparency and trust are the way, for example, we recruit participants and we interact with participants during these pieces of interviews due to the nature of the topics that we talk about around this data privacy, etc. But now we have invested a lot in enablement, especially since the research is decentralized to all teams. That's something that we pay lots of attention to, so that they know how to interact with users, they know how to present their work, they present our values as a UX practice and a UXR practice, so that we can make sure that they know where we're coming from. But also, more importantly, we really show how we do progress thanks to those interviews and surveys and the why not, so that they're also part of how the work evolves over time. On the sensitive topics bit, and I think what is interesting is that now we have reached a stage of maturity in the organization where the organization know how research fit. We have proven the learning potential of our folks, right? So we're able to move to the next level with a design partnership program. So this is not a customer advisory board, because we go very deep. We just select customers that we have for key 2 segments. And we do what I call new product innovation work. So we present work that is highly innovative, not on market, not in product, but in which we go very deep, and we can talk about those sensitive things with them, in a very safe environment, closed and safe environment.
Caroline, you mentioned that you invested in research ops early on, and I'm wondering if maybe you could help paint a picture of how your org set up, because I think that's always instructive in sort of bringing this to life. So you mentioned you have, the triads. Like, how many people are doing UX design, research? How many research ops people do you have? Just roughly, what does it look like at Dashlane? Yeah.
So Dashlane product org is 40 people plus. Don't quote me on the exact number, but I think we're 40 people plus now. We went from 0 to 2 user researchers, including 1 lead. At the beginning, I was doing research, right? Just for the awareness bit, introducing the value of research and gaining the awareness that I needed to prove the value of research for the business, usually speaking. But then I hired my first research lead, who is now having his own team and another researcher to really help the entire organization do research at scale, right? So that he grew from just being user research to product research to also market research, which is the awesome part about it. Yeah. In terms of PX teams, they all run on the triad model. We have a product designer that is sitting in every single team. But what is great is that not only the product designer, but of course the PMs have, if not the same, like more appetite than the PDs to do research at Dashlane. We have lots of research happening. I think the problem that we have is that sometimes we try to moderate the amount of research that's being done and recalibrate the quality of it, which is a very fun part in our journey and our learning curve. But that's where we are today. Yeah.
Great. And sorry, the research ops, is that run by your researchers, or do you have a dedicated research ops function as well?
By our researchers.
Okay, yes. Great. And then UX fits within product. And that's exactly the team you got it. Okay, yeah. Great. So you've got your researchers running research ops, and it sounds like part of the work they're doing is really empowering product managers and designers to do their own research. And then you use the word of recalibrating. All right, let's take a step back, make sure the quality is there, that we're getting the insights we want fast enough, well enough to make better and better decisions.
Absolutely. Those are the 2 experts that really oversee the entire process across all PX team over time to make sure that we get to a world where research remains relevant and effective for the business, right? That's the important bit. And that we can really keep pushing on to the enablement bit as well for the PX teams. Because research really, we continuously discover and ship, right? That's part of our motto. I always joke about that, is that research is our product intel, right? We can make smart decisions based on it. So that's something that really has become the DNA to how we build product at this point. Sometimes, and we joked about the research that I have, is that now like there's too much research, right? At the stage of maturity where they are, they would not need so much research. It's just how do we move into the maturity levels that it can do better research. We are at that fun spot. Yeah.
You talked a little bit about data security best practices when you're doing user research. I'm sure you think about it a lot as a company that's focused on data security. What are some of the best practices that are, maybe less known, some that are, some that are top of mind for you?
Privacy, data security, it's the foundation of Dashlane, right? It's what we care the most about. So basically the way we thought about it, especially when it comes to research and research ops, is that we had to pay lots of attention around data governance. So all the all the data, the customer data that we're collecting, how do we handle that? How is that perfectly secure? Well, that's something that, of course, thanks to our best-in-class technology, we can easily handle with our methods of both encryption, etc. The second bit is what we discussed before, like the research piece, to make sure that it was centralized, so that it would be like manageable, enforceable by the UXR folks across the entire organization in a way that was effective. Proper documentation. We spend lots of time on that. We still do. We all know foundation to great practices and execution and quality over time. So we really spend lots of time reviewing our best practices onto documentation quite a lot for internal communication. But I would say it's a mix of the three. It's governance, research ops, and documentation.
And when you say documentation here, are you thinking best practices guides? Is this more how we communicate, how we share or don't share user data? Yeah, what's included in that documentation?
So for documentation, I would say is how we collect and keep the data over time for it to be accessible to all the teams. So now we have a customer knowledge repo in Great Question. Awesome tool, by the way. So that basically what we love about it is that we can always go back live to those interviews or modernity testing that we do with Great Question. In the sake of transparency, what we also value in terms of best practices is that we share live tidbits of audio, video recordings that we have with our users, right? Because what we know is that depending on which findings and how the data analysis is done, lots of very critical content can get lost through how we filter the content. So we really over-index on that.
Yeah. I imagine there are some parallels when you think about enabling the team internally to do secure research the right, safe, governed way with what you're trying to do with your end users of the product as well, right? It's like there you want them to create secure, tight passwords and processes, but you've got to do it in as seamless a way as possible or people just won't do it. Do you think about that in a similar way?
Actually, in terms of vision work, that's something that we think a lot about, right? Because ultimately, the problem that we have with security is exactly what you refer to. It is abstract. People don't even understand why it is that strict. And that's something that actually we discovered through research, is that we could go a much longer way in terms of ease of use, etc., not just by simplifying the user flows, but by investing into education in product. And that's something that usually lots of B2B tools don't necessarily do, but that for us to reach that level of intuitiveness, we had to invest in so that they could really understand what the technology was and why it was there for them at some point in time.
Right. What's in it for me to do this stuff you're telling me I have to do?
Yeah. Yep. Give me my value prop, otherwise I won't comply.
Yeah. Right.
You mentioned sharing video clips, and I was somewhat surprised by it. I'm just not sure what the best practice is here, actually. But I could imagine that you could get to a level of security or concern about customer data privacy that it actually becomes very hard to advocate for the voice of the customer, right? If you have to, not show videos, I mean, you would anonymize things, right? But like, is there ever a sort of like tension you feel internally about making sure that we really do have the customers represent themselves and, speak in their own voice, which is often the most powerful, and not revealing too much?
Yes, that's something actually that we invest quite a lot in. It's just as businesses being big enterprises, usually it's quite hard to have those people in the door. But we do have interviews live with actually some real customers. So we did one last year just for the UX team. Our CEO actually did two recently in town halls, but that's something that we tend to invest in. Yeah. If it was just up to us, we'll have once a week. But yeah, it would be a hard one to scale on that front. B2B recruiting is always hard, as you know. It's I think the hardest part of the game.
Easier with user interviews. Flip.
Oh yes. We do use user interviews, so yeah.
But yes, always a challenge.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, again, going back to the democratization piece of things. This is, I've said before, right? We went from, people don't want to democratize. They don't like this. They like the control, to now where we are is, I think pretty much everyone accepts that democratization is the way. So it's figuring out the implementation that works for your team and your reality and your context. So I'd love to talk just a little bit more about what specifically you're doing that's working well for you all to enable the designers and product managers and so on to do their own research.
I love this question. So at the beginning, backtracking, when I managed to have research done and proven for the organization, came down to the question, okay, how do we start decentralizing and trusting the teams to do that in an effective way? So we started by creating very clear and succinct guardrails and processes for it. How you recruit participants, how you build a research plan, how you build your interview questions. Is that the right interview questions you're asking, so that everything will be mapped out for them in a simple guide? Very concise, effective, like 4 steps. Here's how you go about it. At the end of those 4 steps along the way, you check in. Before it was myself, now it's the user researchers. Okay, how do I do against like every single one of them? Am I ready to do the research? And we started then to train them, every single one of them, PMs, PDs, even EMs if they wanted to do it, for their first set of interviews. And that's how we started. Very small guide, flexible, adaptable, so that we could learn how fast they would like ramp up onto research. Now, what I would say is that since they're all mature and hungry about research, we keep our model flexible and adaptable. We often revise how we do research, how we bring more tools if they're ready for it. An example that we think about is diary studies. Is something that we want to start adding, that we didn't have the bandwidth before, but we want to do now. But I think that's the key, is that while you want to build visibility for the research function in your organization, you have to always be flexible and adapt the model at least twice a year to really prove to the business there is a fit and that brings business results, right? And being able to tie it to business results is key. And I think that sometimes in the gist of things, your internal vision, you don't think about doing it, but that's something that you got to do. Yeah.
Do you have processes for the folks who are doing research, the designers, the PMs, to feedback loop into you the impact that they're seeing from the research that they're doing? I suppose that could be a risk of democratization, right? Is loosening your grip on the full story of the impact of the research. So,
yeah, that's a big piece we're thinking about as well. So the good thing about this hybrid model that I'm a huge fan about is that while the research is decentralized to all the PX teams, all the knowledge is centralized. So every PX team that do research ought to report about their analysis and their findings to the rest of the organization. So it goes into the repository, it goes into a monthly community of insights meeting that we have across the organization. It goes to town hall so that the knowledge is shared, but also it maintains that level of quality that you're referring to, Erin, so that we can make sure that we really maintain that and grow that over time.
Thinking of this, what did you call it? Monthly customer insights meeting?
Community of insights.
Community of insights meeting. You mentioned as we were planning for this call the importance of storytelling. I'm curious. I think these are sort of related. How do you how does storytelling fit into democratization here?
And without storytelling, there's no good UX, right? At the end of the day, the same thing. Ops. We spend lots of time developing templates to the storytelling bit as well, that they would be delivering at those big presentations, so that everything is really done in concert. But also, since the research is a key part as to how we do product development, we did continuous discovery process. Based on the research, they can identify opportunities they want to prioritize as a triad, or deprioritize based on the research insights they have. And those research findings also goes to how they build roadmaps and how they present roadmaps to leadership, right? And for that, they also have an opportunity canvas and templates to go out of. So, but to the point we had earlier, we can really enable and empower all the way to storytelling with templatizing the work for them, so that they know how to argue, how to make the case, how to present research insights, etc. over time. Yeah,
I see. So these guidelines aren't only how to do recruiting security or how to protect customer information. It's also how to tell a compelling story about the research.
Absolutely. And thank you for the question. And basically, all the research, we were able to scale its impact with the first UXR lead that I hired. And I think that's a super important point for our listeners, is that once you're past the awareness education stage, especially if you're working in a quite wide organization, you need to be super quick onto like hiring your first lead. There's this mix of scrappy mindset with very high rigor in experience of ops to be able to really implement that and scale the impact of research across an organization fast, right?
Where do you, very practical question, where do you store all these templates? Are they Google Docs? Are they a mix of different template types? Are they just in a drive somewhere? Like practically, how do people find them when they need them?
We have a space in Confluence all about research that has the guide for how to do research, and then all the templates and the centralized list of all the discovery initiatives in flight, the ones are pending, the ones that are planned for the future, the parking lot, but everything is in Confluence today.
So people know where to find it. And you can probably see who's looking at it too. It's a nice feature of it.
Yes.
Yes.
No, but also to one of the questions read earlier, doing that as centralizing research in one place was super important, because when you have multiple PX teams, you cannot keep track of who does what, right? And we started to see that there were some redundancies across teams. So that way we could really make sure that they would tandem, partner up together, or even like not double on the work. Yeah.
And so are you finding that folks are generally pretty compliant, pretty enabled, pretty empowered? This is, going well?
I think there's a problem with ops is that the more guidelines are strict, the more you need to educate at the very beginning to explain why you're doing all of this. There was so much appetite for UX when we introduced it that people were quite lenient, and I'm actually glad about that. But yeah, it's due especially for all the security measures that we had to take extra steps. As of course, it needs more prep on our end to explain the why. But I would say that when it comes to research ops, we didn't encounter that type of resistance or change management because the model is still quite flexible and adapts over time. That's part of our model. And plus, we are transparent. It applies to also us, right? But then I know that in product ops, things are more difficult than in research ops. So it depends, right?
While we're on this topic, any lessons learned, best practices, and how to get people to read and follow the guidelines? Like, is it something you introduce in onboarding? Is it more of introducing it step by step, or we start with continuous discovery for a new team and then expand into other types of research?
At Dashlane, we're big fans, and actually the UX team worked on that. We developed an entire onboarding plan for all new hires at Dashlane. So you have your traditional onboarding, like the ones you refer to, and of course there is one with user researcher. That is part of your first 30 days. So that we can make sure that they got all the tits and bits around how we do research, because it's part of how we build products. So they got to be super good at it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, before we jump into our rapid fire section, any, final thoughts that you want to leave folks with, whether they are working in a similar kind of application or something very different that you can?
I mean, I would say that the more complex the technology you work for is, the more you have to lean on research. Because really it has a multiplier effect as to how smart your decision can be on the product development front. So I can just recommend it to the full extent. And the sooner you do it, the better it is. You need to be able to really communicate the value of research early on so that you can really build an organization that thinks long-term in a strategic way and that is empowered to do good work. The second bit is that ultimately research is a craft, right? And researchers have to own it, right? And be super proud of it and do also that part of the awareness and education over time. The thing is always to connect it to the business as much as it is for UX, right? So that it can grow in the organization and be always relevant and effective.
Awesome. All right, rapid fire. What is one of your favorite interview questions to ask in a user interview?
Oh my gosh, on this one, I think I'm really very boring. But I love to go. I love to go deep. So tell me more.
Yeah.
tell me more. Tell me more.
Yeah.
Tell me more. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Until they stop telling more.
Exactly. And just see we have to move on.
Okay. Time for the next one. Great.
Yeah. Tell us more about that. No, I'm just kidding. This is the rapid fire section. What are the top 2 to 3 books that you recommend most to others?
So probably it is not a UXR book per se. In my top one, my favorite is Untitled from Taleb. I'm sure you guys have that already. But it really goes to how you build systems that are flexible and that adapt, right? And I think that applies very, very well to research and how you can build a research function from scratch. Yeah.
Great one. Dense, but good. Awesome. And where can folks follow you? LinkedIn, Twitter, somewhere else?
So I'm pretty innovative. So I'm trying theorg.com, which is a new platform. I'm following these guys for quite some time, so you can find me there. And also the good news is that the UX team is working on a brand new blog for Dashlane as to how we do UX for a security company. And we're going to be unveiling that pretty soon. So if our listeners can log into dashlane.com, so you'll be seeing more of how we do UX behind the scenes.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll share links to that in the show notes. But you said the org and then also a blog that's run on
Dashlane.com.
Yeah. Okay, great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been really educational, and have a great rest of your day and week.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Carol.